The world watches in horror. Rafah, a Palestinian city in Gaza, is under siege. Thousands of innocent civilians, including women and children, are trapped. Their lives are in danger. This is not just a regional conflict, it is a global crisis that demands immediate attention and action. The world must act now to prevent further suffering and loss of life. The situation in Rafah is a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict. Behind the headlines and news reports are real people. They have hopes, dreams, and families. Their lives have been shattered by violence and displacement. Their stories need to be heard. Their humanity must be recognized. The international community has a moral obligation to act. We cannot stand idly by while innocent people are being killed. Silence is not an option. We must demand an end to the violence and a peaceful resolution to the conflict. The time for action is now. The world is watching. History will judge us by our actions or our inaction. Let us choose to be on the right side of history. Let us choose peace. Let us choose humanity.
Turkey, under President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has walked a tightrope between expressing outrage over the Rafah attacks and maintaining his diplomatic channels with Israel. Erdogan has condemned the violence, calling it a massacre and a crime against humanity, while also calling for restraint from both sides. Turkey has a complex relationship with Israel, marked by periods of cooperation and tension. While Ankara recognizes Israel's right to exist, it has been a vocal critic of its policies towards the Palestinians. Turkey's condemnation of the Rafah attacks reflects its deep-seated sympathy for the Palestinian cause and its desire to be seen as a champion of Muslim rights. Erdogan has called for an immediate ceasefire and urged the international community to take concrete steps to protect Palestinian civilians. He has also called for an independent investigation into the Rafah attacks and for those responsible to be held accountable. Turkey's stance highlights the delicate balance that many Muslim-majority nations face in navigating the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. While they share the outrage over the suffering of the Palestinians, they must also consider their own strategic interests and diplomatic relations.
Pakistan, a country founded on the principles of Islamic solidarity and with a long history of advocating for the Palestinian cause, has been notably silent in its response to the Rafah crisis. This silence has surprised many, considering Pakistan's traditional support for the Palestinian people and its condemnation of Israeli actions in the past. Some analysts attribute this silence to Pakistan's current domestic political and economic challenges, which may be taking precedence over its foreign policy priorities. Others speculate that Pakistan is recalibrating its foreign policy approach, seeking to avoid entanglement in regional conflicts while focusing on its own national interests. However, this silence has not gone unnoticed. Many in Pakistan and across the Muslim world are questioning why a country that has historically been a vocal supporter of the Palestinian cause is not raising its voice more forcefully at this critical juncture. Pakistan's silence is particularly concerning given its influence as the world's fifth most populous nation and a key player in the Muslim world. A more vocal stance from Pakistan could help galvanize international pressure on Israel and provide much-needed support to the Palestinian people.
Indonesia, the world's most populous Muslim-majority nation, has condemned the attacks on Rafah in the strongest possible terms. President Joko Widodo has called for an immediate end to the violence and urged the international community to take decisive action to protect Palestinian civilians. Indonesia has consistently supported the Palestinian struggle for self-determination and has called for a two-state solution based on pre-1967 borders. The Indonesian government has also been a vocal critic of Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories, recognizing them as illegal under international law. In response to the Rafah crisis, Indonesia has called for an independent investigation into the attacks and for those responsible to be held accountable for their actions. It has also called for an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council to address the situation and find a peaceful resolution to the conflict. Indonesia's stance reflects the widespread condemnation of the Rafah attacks across the Muslim world and the growing demand for justice for the Palestinian people. The international community must heed these calls and take concrete steps to end the violence, protect civilians, and find a just and lasting solution to this decades-long conflict.
The crisis in Rafah is not an isolated incident. It is the latest chapter in a long and painful history of conflict and suffering. The plight of the Palestinian people, their dispossession, and their struggle for self-determination resonate deeply across the Muslim world and beyond. The images coming out of Rafah, the bombed-out buildings, the wounded children, the grieving families, evoke memories of past atrocities and underscore the urgent need for a just and lasting peace. The world cannot stand by and watch as history repeats itself. International law is clear. The targeting of civilians is a war crime. The indiscriminate bombing of civilian areas, the collective punishment of an entire population, the denial of basic human rights, these are violations of international law that demand accountability. The Muslim world, with its diverse cultures, political systems, and perspectives, finds unity in its empathy for the Palestinian people. This unity, born of shared faith, history, and a sense of justice, can be a powerful force for peace. The world cannot remain silent in the face of this unfolding tragedy. We must act now to stop the bloodshed, protect civilians, and work towards a just and lasting peace. This is not just a regional conflict, it is a global crisis that demands a global response. Governments around the world must use their diplomatic influence to pressure all parties to cease hostilities, allow humanitarian access to those in need, and engage in meaningful negotiations for a peaceful resolution. International organizations, such as the United Nations, must play a more active role in protecting civilians, facilitating humanitarian aid, and holding perpetrators of human rights violations accountable. Civil society organizations and individuals around the world must raise their voices in solidarity with the Palestinian people, demand an end to the violence, and support efforts to achieve a just and lasting peace. We cannot afford to be indifferent to the suffering of others. Our humanity is interconnected. Peace in the Middle East, a region of immense historical, cultural, and religious significance, is essential for global peace and stability. Let us work together to build a world where all people can live in dignity, security, and peace.